Hello, everyone. We are Vega. We're a startup started in January 2024. We raised $65 million from CyberStarts, Accel, Wetpoint, and CRV to completely change how you do security operations and security analytics. And today, we're going to talk about how you can reimagine your SIEM architecture using AWS S3 Buckets, something that we all have today, and how you can increase your visibility and get a lot more out of your data without compromising on costs and breaking the bank. So just a bit on us. I'm Eli. I'm the co-founder and CTO here at Vega. I've been building Vega together with a team for almost 2 years, since January 2024. I'm based in New York, originally from Tel Aviv. I've been doing cybersecurity for more than 15 years, started on the offensive side and now on the defensive side. Actually did a lot of low-level engineering, which is going to show up in the talk today. And also Eran.
Hi, everyone. My name is Eran, head of threat detection and research at Vega. Past 10 years, roughly doing incident response, threat hunting, managed the SOC in the past, led engagements of incident response in a global IR firm, and today at Vega for around a year and a half.
Perfect. So really, when we started Vega, we spoke with hundreds of enterprises, and we asked them and spoke with them about their challenges today that they're facing with their SIEM and their security operations programs. And really, we've identified 3 common problems amongst almost every customer that we spoke with. The first one is growing security telemetry's volume. And with migration to the cloud today and multi-cloud environments, the types and volumes of security telemetry just grows year over year and significantly grows. And you have CloudTrail logs, VPC flow logs. You have all these logs that you want to be able to generate security insights from them, but it's really challenging. It's really challenging many times because of the cost constraints that are coming with the traditional architecture of the SIEM. And really, if you think about the traditional monolithic architecture requires you to send all these logs and pay for each byte of log that you're sending into your SIEM, and therefore you have to deal with all these cost constraints. Another common problem that we've seen amongst every organization or a lot of organizations is, as a result of the growing data volume as well as the cost constraints, we've seen a lot of organizations who just keep multiple data repositories of their security telemetries. Maybe they have some in each cloud environment. Maybe they have a bunch of different SIEMs. We've seen organizations with 9 different SIEMs and different data lakes. And think about how you can deal with that. And all of these problems really stem from the outdated monolithic architecture of the SIEM, which requires organizations and leads, engineers and the security operations teams to work with some assumptions of, what you can do and what you should do with your security telemetries. And the most important assumption that we are challenging at Vega is security telemetry's centralization. And we're asking ourselves, why do you need to centralize and copy each byte of data that you would like to be able to monitor on? Why can't you just query data in multiple data repositories instead of sending it all over the internet into this one centralized data location? Another one is, why the storage and detection engineering and threat hunting capabilities must be coupled into the same monolithic system. Just like how we've seen data technologies that decouple storage and compute, why security operations teams have to rely on a single monolithic piece that couples together their storage and their storage fees together with their security processes and outcomes that they want out of this security data. And really, it also we're asking the question of why cannot you utilize multiple data repositories and storages, maybe even your S3 buckets, to achieve the outcomes that you would like out of a traditional SIEM, querying the data, correlating the data. And what happens really when you have multiple data repositories? Maybe that's due to M&A. Maybe you've acquired a new company and they have another SIEM. Maybe as a result of data residency requirements, you have to keep data in multiple data repositories. But you still want to be able to cross-correlate data across all these different repositories, and even either build a detection, right, on top of this data, maybe do some threat hunting, or respond to a real incident, and you would like to be able to query all this data. Fundamentally, those outdated architectural assumptions that are coming with the monolithic architecture of the SIEM really, make the threat detection team as well as the architecture team, it's a huge challenge to solve these problems with the traditional tools that we have today. And let's talk about how it affects real AWS customers today.
Okay, so we can take AWS as an example how to leverage a federated architecture to achieve security operations. So let's see, there's an organization, they want to monitor and apply detections and threat hunting and incident response over their AWS environment. So for that, first of all, they got to enable those logs. They are CloudTrail, VPC flow logs, guard duty. So there's a fee, of course, for AWS to enable those services. Those services are creating logs and audits, and those logs needs to be retained. So we have the AWS storage. That's your CloudWatch, your S3 buckets. So you have the service creating the logs. You have now the storage there. But the team cannot really leverage those logs for any security purposes when they're simply retained in that storage. So what I got to do in the old-fashioned way, as we call it, they got to send it to the SIEM. So they got to start shipping all the logs from AWS outside of Amazon and into their SIEM. So this is leading for AWS egress costs, for data movement. Then we have the most significant cost for the SIEM ingestion, and also the SIEM storage, because you want to retain it for a long period of time. And most SIEM solutions today, of course, you need to also apply security modules, and this costs additional costs. Meaning that if a security team wants to go ahead and have security operation capabilities on top of your AWS environment, they gotta have 6 places where they're actually spending money just to do this simple thing. Imagine there's an organization with 200, 400, even 750 AWS accounts, and how much money just costs just to get the data to where they can start leveraging it. So with this example, this is what we're, one example of one thing we're coming to fix and address in our federated approach. So let's see how this looks like, for example, when we do not ship the logs to the SIEM. So we got of course, the service, so we got to enable those logs. We got to store them, so in the AWS storage, but that's it. What basically we're doing, we're applying an indexer to index those logs exactly where they already are, where they natively already live. So we're using indexing compute in the same cloud, in the same region, to take those logs in, let's say, S3 buckets, and create an index for them in the same storage. So we're able to achieve that index without shipping the logs outside of AWS. The second part of this process is to be able to run queries, threat hunting, incident response, detections, and that's where Vega as a console which is external, is able to reach out to that storage, to that index, and do queries, do federated detections, do incident response, and essentially everything a team would need to do detection and response over AWS. So we just have some service fees, the storage, the S3 buckets, some compute, but it's a small fraction of the money it actually costs when you don't need to ship it. So in this scenario, an organization with, let's say, 750 plus AWS accounts, they can achieve these security operation capabilities with 60 up to 80% cost reduction by doing this approach. So there's no what we call SIEM tax. Let's see two use cases, an example. With two organizations that we're working with who are using S3 buckets to use the federated architecture. So one is a major e-commerce platform. They essentially had a SIEM solution that they use for everything they need, but they also needed to have a longer retention period. So they're shipping everything to S3 buckets just as a backup. When we started conversation with them, we just told them, listen, all your logs are already in a very low-cost, high-performance storage, but you're also sending it to the SIEM, and it costs you so much money. So essentially, we started to index all their logs, their firewall, EDR, Office 365, any data source that they have in S3 buckets. We just applied indexing for it, exactly where it is. This made their SIEM entirely redundant because they were able to create detections on top of S3, threat hunting on top of S3, incident response the same. So they were able to churn and entirely remove the SIEM, and the immediate value was a 70% cost reduction in total. They have the same security capabilities, but even more than that, because now that they have this additional cost, they're able to say, all right, so now I can have longer retention periods of my data. I can onboard more data that I could not have onboarded before. Let's say I can have load balancer logs or WAF logs or the EDR event telemetry, something that I say I cannot really fit in my SIEM, but now that I have this extra money plus the capability to operationalize data in a low-cost, high-performance storage, now it's an opportunities for them. The second use case is a Fortune 500 pharmaceutical company. They had a very, very large SIEM, really dozens of terabytes per day. And at some point, they realized that they cannot afford to send all the logs from AWS to their SIEM just because of the insane amount of costs that it takes. So they were looking for a solution to have security operations on top of their AWS without shipping it to the SIEM. So we came in, we started to index all their, they have more than 500 AWS accounts. So we started to index their CloudTrail, VPC flow logs, GuardDuty, CloudWatch, any piece of data, RDS logs, everything they needed for the security day-to-day. They gained full visibility, all detection capabilities on top of it, but did not ship a single log out of Amazon. Everything solely there, no egress cost at all, no SIEM tax. But then you can say, but I have an issue now. I have logs for my security team in S3, but also have logs for security team in the SIEM. So practically what happened there is data fragmentation. Practically what happened there is the security teams needs to work on two consoles, and this is what we wanted to avoid. So Vega also have that capability to go ahead and connect to an existing SIEM, also an existing data lake, and also to object storage, and cross-correlate information that does not exist in the same place. One more slide. So there are three core things that we're focusing on. The first one is the capability to have a correlation cross-storage. If I have logs in S3, logs in my SIEM, logs in my Elastic, logs in my Snowflake, logs in other cloud platforms, I can still run one query that is taking these logs and cross-correlating it. So the fragmentation becomes irrelevant. The second thing is hybrid data lakes, meaning that I can have data lake, let's call it S3, I can have something which is the Elastic, and I can have the SIEM. So different data lakes of different technologies, of different even query languages, but it would still work seamless. And the third thing is to still keep a unified security view, meaning one platform, a true, real single pane of glass, even though I have different data lakes, it's still one console, one query language, and just one interface to work in for the team. And let's see how this looks like at a high level.
So you must be asking yourself, how does this magic work behind the scenes? So this is basically what we've been working on for the last 2 years. And we call it SIEM, Security Analytics Mesh. Now, the architecture of Security Analytics Mesh really gives you the flexibility of connecting to the data wherever it makes sense to keep the data. And you must be asking yourself, well, now I have to rip and replace my existing SIEM. But no, as Eran said, one of the core capabilities of Vega is understanding that you already have made a lot of investments in your EDR platform, in your existing SIEM platform, in maybe a data lake where you're shipping some of your logs. Maybe you're using a pipeline tool like a Cribble to push them to S3 Buckets. Vega can help instantly operationalize all of these data repositories without moving all the data. So we can connect to any SIEM, Splunk, Microsoft Sentinel, Google SecOps, Elastic. We can connect to any next-gen SIEM and XDR platforms like the Sentinel-1 Data Lake or the CrowdStrike Next-Gen SIEM. And all of the telemetries that you already have in there, they can stay in there. And over time, if you feel like it makes sense for you to move them to S3 Buckets or a data lake, it's up to you. You now have the flexibility to choose where you want to store your data. Now, but the real power of Vega comes when we talk about data lakes and object storage. So we can connect to also data lakes such as Databricks or Snowflake. And if your CIO decides that you guys are going all in on a specific data lake, that's fine. That should not change how the security team is working or building and managing detections. But most importantly for AWS customers, Vega shines if you have a lot of data already in object storage. And if you think about most of the telemetries that are born in the cloud, or basically all of the telemetries that are born in the cloud, they're naturally born in object storage. Vega allows you to keep all the CloudTrail logs and the VPC flow logs within those object storage. What we do is we have our own indexing technology where you don't need to ship the data to any data lake or a SIEM. We can connect and index the data within the same cloud and within the same region. This architecture makes so much more sense because there's no need to send data all over the internet. Now think about a multi-cloud environment. Maybe you're using multiple clouds. We have a customer who is utilizing all 3 major clouds across tens of regions, and they have thousands of cloud accounts across each cloud provider. With them, we can instantly operationalize all of their data, index the data locally, save a lot of money. This can come up to millions of dollars and even tens of millions of dollars, but still achieve all the security outcomes that they want and get visibility out to all of the security telemetries. Also, you have much more power because you can be in control over your own indexes. You can keep the indexed buckets in your AWS account. So now you have more retention, more flexibility to where you want to put your data, and less cost. Sounds good to me. Really, all of these data repositories are accessible for a single KQL query interface. So our user interface and user experience is very good. People love it, and especially analysts who are already familiar with a pipeline language like SPL or Microsoft Sentinel's KQL, we leverage the same KQL. So it's easy to get started instantly and get your SOC to be familiar with the system. We also obviously leverage a lot of AI and LLM capabilities within the product to make asking simple questions really easy. And I think the most important piece is that this is the foundation for an AI-native security operations. Because once you have this single semantic data layer across all of your security telemetries in every data repository, you can now achieve the AI outcomes that you want out of your data. Because we all know that your AI triage, AI detections, AI ability to respond to threats is only as good as the data that the AI and LLM can access. Now we're almost out of time, but if you would like to chat more, we'll be at our booth 1928. We're also going to give some hot dogs, so I would love to see you there and chat about your SIEM challenges and how Vega can help. Thank you.